Hi, and welcome to a very special edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts, and I am delighted and honored to welcome back to the program today District Attorney Joyce Dudley. Joyce, thank you so much for joining us today, of all days.
I am such a fan of you and your work and your show that it is my honor to be here, truly.
Oh, it's so nice. There's so much I want to talk to you about. But let's start with the news. Word on the street is that you have decided not to run for re-election. Is that correct?
I say that and it hurts my heart, but for a lot of reasons, but yes, that's correct.
And say a word about why now, and kind of what went into that decision.
Well, I think the seed was planted about a year ago during the budget hearings, and some things happened there that made me think that when you put things in balance, if this were the last year of my life, is this how I'd want to spend my life? Unfortunately, with the very untimely death of my husband, I got to see firsthand that it ends, life ends. And I wanted to use his last two words to me as an inspiration, and they were, have fun. Those are the last things he said to me. And I had to ask myself, after 32 years of doing this job, is doing this job in this environment still fun? And the answer to that was no, not as much fun as other things. And it's time to do those other things, because if I died in office, I would feel that I missed quite a bit, which is not to say I'm unhealthy. I'm incredibly healthy. And part of what I'm going to be doing this year is getting stronger, healthier, and becoming a better athlete.
Yeah, well, everybody knows about your Wonder Woman workouts, and you even managed to do them during the worst of the pandemic when you were locked down. Well, you know, as political reporters, of course, we're always astonished that any elected official, is not running for re-election. You're first elected in 2010, as I recall. So,
yes.
So this would have been your fourth term. So what about, what are you going to leave behind? Are you endorsing anyone?
Yeah, I am endorsing someone, and I'm very proud to endorse John Savernock. He's the assistant district attorney. He was the assistant district attorney in Fresno. He came to Santa Barbara as a deputy district attorney who worked in Lompoc. He proved himself as a trial lawyer. He proved himself as a leader. I made him a chief in Santa Barbara, and then made him the assistant district attorney. I think he's the best person for the job.
Okay, and you will be formally endorsing him, correct?
I am. I will absolutely be endorsing him, and at the news conference on Thursday, I did endorse him.
Okay, all right. This was a hard decision, though, to not run again. How long did you struggle with it?
The seed truly was first planted at last year's budget hearings, and that was the first time it occurred to me, wait a minute, maybe you should think about not running again.
What was going on in the budget? What was going on in the budget hearing specifically that made
some unprecedented things? For instance, I was seeking funding. I believe it was for a conviction review unit in the district attorney's office, so that we could take a hard look at some of the convictions and see if we wanted to relook at them in terms of whatever decisions we might make, up to and including releasing someone. The public defender's office was also engaged in this. I had asked for the funding to do that. And I saw something happen at those hearings that was shocking. I saw the public defender walk up to the mic and say she did not want me to get those fundings. In fact, she didn't want to level the playing field. I've been at the district attorney's office for 32 years. I have never heard one department head take a position that another department head shouldn't get funding ever under any circumstances. I've certainly never heard the words from a public defender, they don't want to have a level playing field. And I was shocked, literally shocked by her statements. I responded accordingly. that I was shocked, that I did think it was wrong. And I did not get that funding. So the fact that it occurred, the fact that the Board of Supervisors 3-2 did not want to fund the district attorney's office for those efforts, the fact that she wasn't called to the carpet for doing such a thing, it occurred to me that this is wrong. I am so deeply, deeply concerned about public safety and justice in Santa Barbara. I've been here 32 years and something like that occurred. So I think that was the first time that my husband's words came back to me. Are you having fun? You know, is this the goal? Now I'm involved in several other national and state organizations where I will continue to work after I'm retired from the DA's office. But I think in response to your question, honestly, that was the first moment I considered not running.
Well, it seems to me there's two parts of that, and let me just try to unpack it a little bit.
Sure.
So there's obviously the political angle and the local politics and all politics being local, but it seems to me there's a broader issue there that you're getting at, and I want to talk about that a little bit, and that is, I mean, there is this debate, disagreement, conflict, whatever, that's happening nationwide, that's happening in cities across the country about, what is the nature of public safety. And, I suppose we could go back to the Greeks or something, the punishment versus rehabilitation, but, now it's kind of public safety versus social justice. And we see in other cities, so-called progressive prosecutors who are putting in reforms, and some of them are being recalled. It seems like the pendulum really shifted at the George Floyd killing. Say a word about that. What is your perspective on that whole kind of philosophical, political strain that's in the system?
Well, I disagree with your words. It's public safety versus social justice, because I think public safety is social justice. And I think that's where things start getting murky. But I look at, do people in our community, people of Santa Barbara, feel safe? Do the people of Santa Barbara feel that people who are being accused of crimes are being treated justly? Is there justice in Santa Barbara? When you ask the big question, is there justice in Santa Barbara? You have to say, do people feel safe too? That is part of social justice. What got to me, Jerry, was that it's always been my goal to do that. And suddenly it got murky. And when I tried to figure out how that shift happened, it occurred to me that some people in the Democratic Party are pandering to the outspoken minority of people who I think just haven't experienced the criminal justice system the way that I have. And I started 50 years ago with social service agencies, Head Start, COM, all of the various agencies that I worked, Domestic Violence Solution, the Rape Crisis Center. Long before I went to law school, I had my heart in that community. So I understand the plight. I understand the concept of unjustly accused. I've experienced it. But I also understand all too well the powerlessness that a crime victim feels. A crime victim who's done absolutely nothing, I guess I still get upset about it, suddenly is subject to a criminal act. And suddenly our community has stopped saying, what about the present victim? What about future victims? And it's all about the suspect and the defendant. I'm looking for balance. And I think Santa Barbara did a really good job with that balance in the 32 years I've been here until recently.
Yeah. Well, we could trace, I guess, the recent course of this debate back to 2014 when we had Proposition 47 on the ballot. And you and I talked about that at the time.
Yes.
And I confessed I was surprised that you were against it. It
right.
Basically moved a class of offenses from felonies to misdemeanors. It was going to clear the record of people who were in jail with those. But it was the first of a series of things that's kind of brought us to this point. So why has the pendulum moved so much, and even in Santa Barbara? And I just want to bring up one example, because if my recollection is correct, one of the supervisors wanted you to agree to a certain percentage of cases that came to you that were going to be diverted or
Yeah.
not charged, which seemed a little goofy to me. Talk about that.
Goofy's gentle. I would say outrageous. My job is to evaluate every case that comes into our office and to make a decision what to do in the interest of justice. And I would never, ever say I will divert a certain percentage of cases, because that is ignoring the case. And when I say the case, it's not just the crime, it's the person who committed the crime. And you have to look at that individually to decide what the best course would be. Would it be to not file the case, to divert the case, to seek treatment as part of the punishment, to seek county jail, to seek state prison? This is what we do at the DA's office. We certainly never say we're going to do a certain percentage. I couldn't sleep on my pillow at night if I ever said that. And going back to Prop 47, you make such a good point. As you know, my best friend is Jackie Lacey. She used to be the district attorney of Los Angeles. She's no longer the DA. Gascon is. People in Los Angeles, well, I think I heard 97% of the deputy district attorneys in the LA office, and that's the biggest district attorney's office in the world. There are about 1,000 DAs. 97% were supporting the recall. That's interesting, but to me, it's the people on the street and what they're experiencing and how scared they are. And LA is our neighbor, and that's what happens when people lose track of what's important to a community. Let me give you an example of Prop 47 in Lompoc. Merchants in Lompoc tell me that people go around with a calculator into their store and stealing just under 950, so they'll only get a citation. And then maybe they'll come to court, maybe they won't, but they're that cavalier. And I heard that and I thought that was awful. But then I heard what's happening in Los Angeles. Jackie Lacey's husband was at Ross Dress for Less in Los Angeles. He watched a man come in with an empty duffel bag, drape it over the cart, push the cart. He had a calculator, take, I assume, under $950 worth of stuff, put it in the duffel bag, zip up the duffel bag, and walk out the door. Nobody even stopped him. He pointed out to a salesperson, that person just stole all those goods. No one did a thing. We cannot live in the land of lawlessness. And when we say, well, we want to treat certain classes differently, the only way a drug dealer can get money for drugs is by stealing. If they're in no position to work and their family isn't giving them any money, that's the only choice. And when things aren't readily available to steal in stores, of course, the next thing is residential burglaries. And that affects every fiber of our community.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because, in every, I watch polls a lot. I read polls, and in every poll, concern about crime has been going up since the pandemic. And, the people on the other side of this, the so-called progressive prosecutors, say, well, it's really, a myth, crime is down. Give us a factual baseline. What is happening with crime and crime rates in Santa Barbara County?
Let me tell you why that's an interesting question, rather than my understanding is that violent crimes are going up. Theft crimes are going up. That's my understanding. I can tell you some things I'm sure of. Overdose deaths have grossly gone up. And these are people who are dying of overdoses of methamphetamine or fentanyl or some combination of the two. So we know that's happening in our community. But depending upon how you skew data can depend upon the other answers to your questions. The district attorney's office has been asking for a data analyst for the last few budget hearings. I'm thinking and hoping that's going to happen now. And we're going to have some real figures. The biggest problem, Jerry, and the reason my answer isn't as direct as you and I like to speak to each other, is the definition of recidivism is different in every criminal justice system. So in some places, it would be a contact with law enforcement. In other places, it would be an arrest. In other places, it would be a conviction. So when we say, are crimes going up? We have to say, what is a crime? And that's where things are getting murky. I can tell you that the people of Los Angeles feel less safe. Friends of mine from Portland, from Seattle, from Boston, not criminal justice people, people I went to college with, all feel less safe in their communities. And I'm sorry to be so vague. Hopefully a year from now, I can be much more direct.
Well, all those cities you mentioned, I think do have so-called progressive prosecutors. Chesa Boudin in San Francisco, Gascon in LA, Kim Fox in Chicago, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, Alvin Bragg, and so on. And I read an interview with Chesa in the New York Times recently and he was asked specifically about those property crimes. And of course, there have been these viral videos of people going into Walgreens and other stores in San Francisco with shopping carts and just taking stuff. And he said, well, that's not really a district attorney problem. They don't want to have the security guards, try to restrain the people and the cops can't get there in time. It's not my doing. But don't you think
he's wrong? It's absolutely his doing.
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is why. Why would a law enforcement officer arrest somebody if he knows his district attorney's office isn't going to file charges? Why? You have to send a message from the top. The district attorney's office is the chief law enforcement official for any county, for Santa Barbara County. I am. So from the top, I have to send a very clear message. These are the crimes that we're going to prosecute. Not, gee, you do your thing to arrest and we won't prosecute. That's not the way the system works. I think it's a cowardly response to say it's not the district attorney's responsibility. I think it absolutely is.
So if I hear what you're saying, the kind of statements that he and other prosecutors have made about, we want to get at the root causes of crime.
Yes.
An alternative to sort of traditional law enforcement. It creates this perception of permissiveness, does it not?
Yes.
That emboldens criminals.
Yes, but I think if you really want to make a difference in criminal justice reform, that you do go to prevention. That is where we're going to get our biggest bang for the buck. I've often said when I was the director of Head Start, I did more to prevent crimes than I did as a district attorney. And I believe that. I believe some very basic things. We need good prenatal care for at-risk families. We need home visits for families that are at risk. We need preschool programs for all. We need Head Start programs where they get medical and dental. We need mental health and physical health screening. If we can take a portion of the funds that we use now and really focus on babies to 5-year-olds, what a difference we could make. Because I'll tell you, if a 5-year-old walks into school and they don't have the same kind of educational background as others have had because they went to preschool, that child walks into a foreign country and that child feels alienated and that child feels hopeless and that child starts to space out and that child doesn't feel that they have a place in school. So what happens? That child eventually is unsuccessful. That child eventually can become a truant. And 70% of the people in state prison are people that didn't finish high school. So really, you really want to make a difference? Let's spend that money on those. Let's fight crime and invest in kids.
So looking for the root causes of crime, traditional law enforcement, you're saying you need both, but you feel, if I hear what you're saying, that those ideas are out of balance right now.
I think we absolutely need both. And when the suggestion is that we should defund the police, well, that's ridiculous. We want to give more funding for social service agencies, but when you defund the police, you make the communities less safe. One of the things that's been heartbreaking for me, in addition to all the information we've gotten on critical race theory and everything else that's happening in a variety of communities, to people of color, there is also what's happening to law enforcement officers. And I'm not saying they're analogous. I understand the struggle of both. But putting the struggle of people of color aside for the moment, let's talk about law enforcement. Right now, law enforcement is being portrayed as the bad guys. They're being portrayed as racist. They're being portrayed as self-serving, as lying, as contemptuous. And as a result of that, the trust between law enforcement and our communities is going downhill. It's getting more and more difficult to hire high quality law enforcement officers, for them to want to stay in the business, for them to feel proud of the work, and for the community to feel proud of them. We have to invest in law enforcement, in their education, in their mental health. You know, you and I have spoken about this. I'm deeply concerned about first responders' mental health, the kinds of experiences they have, making sure they get the support and treatment they need. Everything we've said so far today, Jerry, was about balances. It's about prevention. It's about the community. It's about law enforcement support, and it's about district attorneys taking responsibility.
Yeah. And you mentioned, you know, the difficulty of recruiting officers. The city of Santa Barbara is down nearly 24 officers, which is a big number in terms of our police.
Jerry, every law enforcement agency in Santa Barbara County, every single one of them is down officers.
Yeah. Well, and you know, let's circle back on perhaps the dumbest political slogan of all time: defund the police. We saw Sheriff Bill Brown, who's your partner, obviously, in law enforcement in the county, pushing back on the supervisors recently, that's what they were trying to do by taking money. I guess it was saved from overtime. It was a little complicated, but is there a majority on the Board of Supervisors that is pushing too hard in that direction?
I don't know, and I hope not, because we don't need to defund the police. We need to give resources for prevention, intervention, and prosecution. I think that those supervisors have another opportunity in the next budget hearing to show what their position is on that. In the past, I have felt let down. I'm hoping to not be let down this year.
What is your view about zero bail, no cash bail, which was in effect during the pandemic as a, you know, is that helping public safety or not?
Here's the problem. When you hear a concept like zero bail and you just go to the 2-second rendition of what that means, most people in the community think, oh, people who have more money are being treated differently in the criminal justice system than people who have less money. So you can buy your way out of jail. To some extent, that's true. But as we know, people with more money have greater resources in terms of healthcare, mental health care, education. That's always been what we have in America. So a criminal justice system is not unique. But that is not what zero bail is about on the very next level. Because what I want people to understand not just the nature of the present crime that they were arrested on, but their past crimes, to understand other treatment programs they've had, other diversion programs they have. Look at each case, as I said a few minutes ago, right there. What has this person done and who is this person? And then make a determination as to whether it's in the best interest of the people of Santa Barbara County, including the suspect defendant, to be released on no bail. Don't just say no bail. Well, it's like sticking your head in the sand.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because I think there's a commonality among folks on the progressive prosecutor side. It's an ideology. In other words, it's based on ideas and values and principles. Whereas what I hear you saying is we really need to look at the individual context of every case.
You know, Jerry, that could be said about so many things in our community. When people say, what's the answer to the homeless problem? Individual. People become homeless for a variety of different reasons. Why would we possibly treat them all the same? And I think that a big part of the homeless problem has to do with drug addiction. But what's the best response to that? One of my favorite programs, of course, in North County is SAM, but in South County Rescue Mission, and now because they do that. They offer people a safe place to sleep at night, but they also offer a drug treatment program. And that's what I think can make a difference in the individual lives of those who are homeless because they're under the influence and addicts. But it really is an individual thing. For some people, it's mental health. For some people, it's just physically getting back to their home. We can't cookie cut social justice or criminal justice.
Say a word about co-response teams, which is
Love them. Love co-response teams.
Talk about what
Absolutely.
they are and what you why it's a benefit to the community.
Oh, they're so terrific. So if I talk about defunding police versus not, that's a great place to put funding. Every law enforcement agency in Santa Barbara County should have multiple co-response teams. The SO has it. Santa Maria PD is starting to get it. Santa Barbara PD. And what that is it makes so much sense. You know, when a dispatch call comes in, you understand the person's had a history of mental illness, and you understand how they have responded in the past. And you bring social workers and people who understand. If a law enforcement officer arrives through no fault of their own, and somebody is in a chaotic mental state, they are going to be fearful, defensive, and act aggressive. Sadly, those kinds of people often got arrested in the past when what they really needed was a safe place. Absolutely. They needed a hospital, they needed a safe place to go. But now with the co-response team, there are very few arrests in situations like that, and people are getting the help they need. I love the co-response programs.
It kind of goes to another issue too, because there have been incidents where cases like that, people have ended up getting shot. And then it goes to the whole question of, whether law enforcement officers, should be prosecuted sometimes. And those decisions come to you. You've been criticized in some ways for that. Do you think that there should be some form of citizen review board for the sheriff's office in the way that the city of Santa Barbara is moving ahead for its police department?
Yeah, I think that there are three top decisions that are the hardest decisions for a district attorney to make. And certainly officer-involved shootings are one of them, because it requires a level of detail that is extraordinary. And it requires an understanding of the totality of a circumstance and to understand what was in the mind of everybody involved. I've been involved with my work with Post, making videos to other district attorneys explaining this procedure. But it's so important that we have people that understand the law and understand evidence. If we could form citizen review committees where people really did have an understanding of the law and evidence and psychology and sociology, I think it would be terrific. Because I think which is why we're starting our restorative justice program in Goleta, with people from Goleta being on that panel. People bring something very worthwhile. If the appointments are merely political appointments, what a waste of time. Let's get at people who really, for instance, somebody like you're in a position to understand these things, and we need more people like you involved in processes like that.
Well, sounds like a lot of work.
I know you don't want to do it. It's a hard job.
But to your point, the one of the controversies about the effort in the city is there's a majority of the committee that says nobody with a law enforcement connection should be on this panel. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that's true if we look at it directly. For instance, a child, a relative, somebody whose identity is tied up with law enforcement should not be on the committee, because we already have that. But by the same token, we can't eliminate across the board anyone that has an understanding, because when we all turn on our national media stations now, whether it's CNN or MSNBC or Fox, we lean in when the talking heads are people who have experience. It's the same thing that would happen on a committee like that. You lean in for people who've had the experience.
All right. Okay. Let's talk about your long career in the district attorney's office. You joined in 1990, is that correct? Yeah. And I've only lived here 20 years. But, just on my own observations and experience, it seems to me you personally have had a very substantial impact in
Say it again, Jerry, what?
a very substantial impact in, you want me to say it again? A very
I'd
substantial.
like to say it the third time, Jerry. I want my kids to hear you say
in
that.
prosecuting, but more than prosecuting, in really raising the profile of sex crimes, of domestic violence, of human trafficking. I think of a whole category of felonies that were not as visible, that did not have such high profile before. Talk about that, if you would.
Sure. Well, I came to Santa Barbara to go to UCSB. I'm a proud Gaucho undergraduate, and I also have a master's degree from there. And how do you not fall in love with Santa Barbara? So I came in about 72, 73, went back for graduate school back east a little bit, and then came back to Santa Barbara. But when I began working at, Children's Home Society, Head Start programs, I had a master's in educational administration and a master's in early childhood education and a BA in psychology. And I had always intended to stay as an advocate for children. That was my plan. My first volunteer job, I was 17, and I worked in the New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. So I saw firsthand what happens to abused and neglected kids. The pilot lot got lit then, and it's never gone out. As the director of Head Start, our Children's Home Society, I watched a case of what I viewed was child abuse. I reported it, and nothing happened. And the same person brought that child back the next day. I was shocked. And I was given a snotty response along the lines of, if you don't like it, you become a lawyer. Well, little did I know, the world know that I was going to, because I had no intention of being a lawyer. But I thought, if I really want to make a difference in child abuse, apparently that's the way to do it. So I had 3 little munchkins at a time, and I started law school, got pregnant with my 4th boy in law school. And it was always, always my passion to be a voice for the voiceless. It started with child abuse, then it went to sexual assault, hate crimes, animal abuse. That was just, I feel, for lack of a better term, my calling. I felt most at home in my body when I was doing that work. And so I kept doing those cases. And I'll tell you, Jerry, I was never the smartest person in the room, ever. But when it came time to my trials, there wasn't anyone in the room that knew the case better. I worked very, very hard, realizing that I don't have that gift of immediate intelligence that some of my colleagues have. So I studied the law, I studied the evidence, and what weighed on me so heavily was not just bringing justice to those vulnerable crime victims, but the idea that if I'm not successful, this person could do it again. That drove me. And I never expected to run for district attorney. I just expected to continue to be a trial lawyer for vulnerable victims, but that happened too. And I think the community wanted me to be DA because they saw that work ethic and that passion for vulnerable victims and the disdain for anyone who could prey on them.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the right word, which I was just about to use, which is, I think your passion about this, and obviously you were conscientious in pursuing the cases in the substance, but there's your powerful feelings about this of right and wrong, and this is, it broke through. I mean, it broke through in the media. I remember from the paper, and we would have stories about it. So I think that's something that, one person can make a difference, that you really did change in the district attorney's office. And I think we'll be missed. What else has changed since you started?
Oh gosh. I was very frustrated at my office's response to the Tea Fire. That was part of the reason I decided to become district attorney. And I said that I wanted to create an arson task force. I didn't have a model for it. It wasn't happening any place in the state, but I wanted an investigator and 2 deputy district attorneys to be highly trained in fire science, so that one of those cases came down, we could make an immediate educated decision. And when I was running for it, I think it was Chris who said, how are you going to do that without any money? And I said, I don't need any money to do this. And he said, yeah. Turns out I didn't. The arson task force has now been running for 12 years. It doesn't cost the people of Santa Barbara County any additional funds. What I did is I brought together all the arson investigators throughout Santa Barbara County, and we began to meet, and we talked about cases, and we educated each other. My deputy district attorneys and my investigator who decided they wanted to be part of this would roll out to fires the minute the suppression team was gone and start looking at the evidence, collecting the evidence, understanding the evidence. They never sought overtime. They wanted to do it because of all the right reasons. And I've heard stories about how our arson investigation team has worked. For instance, there was a case in Lompoc where a child died. And what a terrible situation. But within 24 to 48 hours, it became clear that this was not a murder. This was not a manslaughter. This was just a tragic, horrible death. Can you imagine the days, weeks, months, if it took that long to figure all that out? So very proud of the arson task force, and Joe Pore from Santa Barbara City Fire was my brother and all that. And then the truancy program had died. There was no truancy program in Santa Barbara County. I went to the grand jury, talked to them about that.
How does that work? What's the operational?
The truancy program is, there was a truancy program, and then funding got cut, and then there wasn't a truancy program. I always viewed keeping kids engaged in school as the best form of crime prevention we could have. So I went to the grand jury and I said, hey, you guys into this? And they were fabulous. They became such hardworking advocates. They went to the Board of Supervisors meeting, and we got funded for the truancy program. So now we offer kids both the carrot and the stick. We so rarely prosecute parents, situations like that, but we hold people accountable. We go to school meetings, we report on truancy rates, and we quickly went to one of the lowest truancy rates in the state of California once our program got up and going. And Gordon Auchincloss was the person who was in charge of that. And it was a great program, and it still exists today. And you can imagine during COVID what a struggle that was, but it's still working. So
if somebody's cutting school, if repeatedly, chronically, their parents get a letter and
well, it's not even chronic before the parents get the letter. We're on it. Every day a child is not in school is an alienating experience for a child. We got to find, and the basic thing is we want to know what the reason is. Is the reason that the parents aren't getting there, that the parents are experiencing domestic violence? Is the child experiencing child abuse? Are gangs stopping that child from making it to school? Do they not have the money to get their child to school? Do they not understand the importance of school? So it's not as if we say, the law is get your kid to school, we're throwing you in jail. That never happens. We're saying this is the law and you're not complying. How do we help you do that? And we work closely with the school districts. Susan Salcido, our superintendent of schools, has been terrific, as has Bill Cerrone.
As you reflect on 3 decades in the DA's office, what are 2 or 3 cases that really are top of mind to you that you will always remember or were the most consequential?
Oh boy, there are so many. And Jerry, part of my happy mental health is that I forget them as quickly as I can, because I've seen.
I do that with stories I've written too.
Oh my God, I've seen the worst of the worst. And I work very hard when I'm doing it, and then I step away and try to go for a hike in the mountains. But the ones that stand out, I think it was 1994 and 1995. I had a suspect who was 19 years old who molested his 3-year-old and his 5-year-old half sister. I knew it would be extremely traumatizing for this 3-year-old and 5-year-old to come to court. I knew they'd be very confused by it. I think we'd be re-victimizing them, bringing them to court. The mother of the victim and the mother of the perpetrator was the same person. The dynamics of this were terrible, but this 19-year-old had to be held accountable for what he did to these kids, and he had to. So I approached the judge and I said, I believe it was Judge Ochoa. And I said, there is a law out there. People don't use it very much, but there's a law that we can use a videotape of these children testifying instead of the kids. I have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops. Well, it took 3 days of hearings. I brought in counselors and psychologists and experts in the field. And at the end of those 3 days, Judge Ochoa ruled that in fact, the videotape could be used. That case immediately went up to the appellate court. The appellate court stood by it. So justice was served in that case, not only in him being held accountable, but also in the fact that those 2 little girls never had to go to court. So as a trial lawyer, that's always going to be my favorite case, because he's now out of prison and he's doing fine, but he served a chunk of time in prison. And it's an important. Another thing that I did was I changed the judge's approach to how to do hearings. It's intimidating for children to walk into a courtroom. So I worked with Judge Ochoa and many of the other judges, Judge Slater, and we were able to create a child-friendly courtroom. So when children came in to testify, it was appropriate and that they were asked developmentally appropriate questions. So I made a difference for both non-testifying kids and testifying. As a district attorney, I would say the variety of kinds of cases that I've had to prosecute either personally or supervise, certainly the Arias case, the Ala Vista massacre, the Gaviota oil spill. Gaviota oil spill was the first time that we ever got a felony against a major oil company. The Pierre Habash murder, the one that we just finished, we had 1, 2, 3 horrible murders of entire families, and working closely with them, working closely with the psychological defenses of them. Those have all had a major impact on me in my office, and what an incredible honor to have been a part of that thought process.
What about the Golden State Killer, the mass murder? You had a piece of that.
I did.
County DAs did.
And that was interesting. It was kind of more of me being a bridge. There were several Republican district attorneys prosecuting that case, several Democrat district attorneys. We were all trying to find justice together. There was at first a lot of what you'd imagine with a room full of type A's. And then I had suggested, why doesn't everybody come to beautiful Santa Barbara? And I'll be your host, and we'll all sit down at this beautiful table. They'll have the ocean. Let's do what's in the best interest of this case, and let's keep it within the confines of this case. We're not making any statements about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're saying what's the right thing to do in this case. And happily, I was able to, because of my extraordinary colleagues, bring the whole thing together. And ultimately, we were able to bring those victims a sense of, they went from victim to survivors to advocate. I was incredibly angry at the perpetrator for everything they had done. And I certainly had an opportunity to confront him. And for some of the victims, they needed me to do that because they were still too shocked and abandoned to do it themselves. It was an honor to work with Anne Marie Schubert on that. She was really the leader.
And she's going to be running for Attorney General.
She is.
Former Republican, now a declined state, but and she'll be running against the appointed Attorney General Rob Bonta, appointed by Governor Newsom. And you know, I look at that race and I kind of see this debate, this conflict that we've been talking about, the kind of balance. Where does the balance come down? So that should be interesting to watch. So death penalty, effective, not effective, should it be kept, not kept?
Well, when I first came to office, I reversed a death penalty case that the previous district attorney had sanctioned to be a death penalty case. I looked at it and I decided that it was not an appropriate death penalty case. Death penalty cases always had to be the worst of the worst. When I was running, I explained the 6 elements that I expected before I would do that. And the fact that it had already been decided didn't stop me from turning it around. Then there have been about maybe 12 other possible death penalty cases since I've been the district attorney. I analyzed each one and decided that they didn't meet those 5 threshold questions for me. And then along came the Pierre Habash case. I looked at that and I decided it did. It in fact did.
Horrible murders of the.
In every conceivable way. And the evidence was overwhelming. Scientific evidence, recorded evidence, physical evidence. It was overwhelming amount of evidence, and the circumstances where he killed that 5-year-old, her mother and her father, for money, which is, and so it was thought out. I can never say it was well thought out. Even with that, I was working closely with the public defender's office throughout, looking for that possible life without possibility of parole. Because right now, as you and I discussed, Governor Newsom decided that he wasn't going to sign any death warrants. So we had a governor who was presently doing that. By the same token, we also had voters who decided they didn't want to eliminate the death penalty. So I had to find my own way in all that, which was, I thought it was an appropriate charge to file the death penalty. And I think it's appropriately just to go with life without possibility of parole, given the situation.
All right, let me wrap up this segment. What ideas do you have about keeping our community safe in the future as you leave your post?
Well, certainly I want to, as we've said, focus on those prevention programs. The next thing is I want us to look critically at intervention. When we talk about things like diversion, make sure that the diversion is going to make a difference, is going to have a positive effect on the public safety of the community and of justice. Don't just divert because that's the latest woke term. Carefully make that decision. Then when it comes to punishment, what's the best form of punishment? Some combination of treatment, incarceration, perhaps. Again, look at each individual case. And then focus on reentry. Most people don't spend the rest of their life in prison. What are we doing so when people who served their time in prison are released, in order to make sure that they get incorporated in the community and they don't commit more crimes? They're going to need jobs. They're going to need housing. They're going to need that kind of education and support in order to be productive human beings in our communities. So if you don't look at criminal justice from prevention to reentry, and you focus on any one area, you're blind, because we need it all.
All right, let me ask you a couple of personal questions as we start to wrap up here. You mentioned your kids earlier. When you started in the DA's office, four sons, is that?
Yes.
That's right, yeah. And then there was a pretty broad range of ages. How did you do a super mom thing with that?
Because they had a super dad, and because I was convinced you could. I had role models like Golda Meir, who I saw, well, you can do this. You can be a great leader and a great mom and a member of the community. So the littlest guy was 2. And now I'm very proud to say that Sam Dudley is a Santa Barbara County firefighter who's doing wonderful things in terms of suppression of fire, but also in terms of first responder resiliency and bringing his companion dog to firefighters who've been traumatized. One of the things I hope to do in retirement is to work closely with at ease to continue to give first responders that support they need so they can come to each crime, each scene with their whole selves. And my other guys all went through, Santa Barbara High and Bishop, and every one of them went to Santa Barbara Community College for a time. One graduated there and went off to Berkeley, then got his master's in engineering, and he's now working at Livermore Lab. Another went to City College, then transferred to Davis, then went on to law school, and now he's an environmental attorney. Another one went to Bishop and went off and got his master's in education, came back and became a history teacher and a coach at Bishop. So I'm really proud of the way they've all developed. I'll tell you a quick story about my third son. He got very upset when I would leave for law school. He had his mom so wrapped. And so I would leave, I had to be at class at 6:30. I'd come home from work, make dinner. We'd all sit down to dinner together, and he'd move his food around the plate, make sure I heard it, clinging his knives and forks, and not eat. And then when I would leave, I had a big plate glass window. He'd throw himself on the window and cry as I left. So I would go off to law school with this image of my starving child who's weeping. Well, I felt terrible about it. I intellectually got it, but years later, I had dinner with him, and it was just he and I finally decided I'm going to bring this up. So I said to him, okay, let's talk about how much I psychologically damaged you by going to night law school. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, don't you remember? I told him what I just told you. He said, Mom, this is what I remember about you in law school. I was in kindergarten. You went to law school. One day I took one of your heavy law school books to show and tell. And I said, my mommy goes to school just like I do. And I said, that is all you remember? He said, absolutely, Mom. I'm so proud of you. Oh my God, I wish I knew that then.
Yeah.
So I want to say to any of these young moms and dads who are furthering their careers in whatever capacity, your kids get it. You're role models. Be there for them, listen to them, hug them, love them up, but also give them a role model to look up to and to aspire to become.
All right. When's your last day of work?
January 3rd at noon.
Yeah, January 3rd, 2023. And,
Yes.
And so what are you going to do with yourself?
Well, the plan then is to get in the car and go to Colorado and do downhill skiing for 2 months. I've never had a chance to. So I'm going to be getting myself in better shape all along and looking forward to really giving myself that incredible experience of downhill skiing. I've done it, but sporadically. Then I hope to teach a class in leadership of the Santa Barbara College of Law. I'm meeting with them to talk to them about that. I hope to work for At Ease in terms of helping first responders respond and come back and resilient. I hope to continue to work with POST, Police Officer Standards and Training, in terms of the decertification of law enforcement and POST Commission. And that just getting in shape, doing those jobs all part-time.
Iron woman workouts.
Okay. Oh God, yes. I mean, today, before I could even begin to do the work, there was 2 hours in the gym and swimming laps. And for me, with my ADD, working out centers me. And but I want to be in even better shape than I am now. I'll be 69 when I retire, about a month away from 70. I want to be in the best shape I've ever been in when I'm 71.
All right. We started talking about the news, a breaking story that you're not going to seek re-election. And let me just go to another level of news, which is obviously what's happening in Ukraine right now. You were at a rally, a protest, a demonstration the other day, and you have some personal connection. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah.
And what you're feeling about it?
Well, when my grandfather was 13, my great-grandmother, they lived in Kiev. My great-grandmother knew the Russians were coming to slaughter the family. This was during the pogroms. And she had to do the hardest thing any mother has to do. She had to send my 13-year-old grandfather off on a boat. And he didn't speak a word of English. They did not have enough money to send him with. He arrived in New York City. He was homeless. He was penniless. He lived between tenements. He started selling overripe fruit and started selling people socks in order to earn enough money to get a space on the floor in New York City. And eventually, he not only did what was my grandmother's wish of bringing over his 2 siblings, my great-grandmother, but he brought over my uncles and my grandmother and my grandfather. So everyone got to come to America and live and die here. And this was just a little boy of 13 who did it all. I've always been angry at what happened to them, that they were uprooted like that. But, Michelle Obama inspired me with "They go low, we go high." And it was always my intention in retirement to go back to Poland and to be a guest lecturer, not accept any money, and talk about the criminal justice system. And now,
back to Poland,
more than ever,
or back to Kiev?
Back to Poland, Kiev, that whole area, because my other family came. My father's family, unfortunately, didn't get out. Some of them went to Auschwitz. But my mother's family was the ones that got out during the pogrom. I want to go back to both places And I want to just be a guest lecturer in any law school that'll have me in that area to talk about our criminal justice system and how incredible it can be. And that would be, as weird as it might sound, I don't know, Jerry, my way of healing and my way of healing my family. We went back and we made the country that made the horrible decisions that they did better.
Well, let's hope that it's still standing by the time
Yes.
you get there. All right. Well, Joyce Dudley, thank you so much for spending time with us and reflecting on a really, I think, impactful and consequential career that's really affected this community in a very positive way. And I guess we're sorry to see you go. I'll miss talking with you about these things, but we'll look at your judgment on the fellow that you're recommending to come back, and good luck with all of your future endeavors. And you've certainly earned it. Thank you for all of your public service.
Well, Jerry, I'll be around till January 3rd. I hope you'll have me back again. I'm sure there'll be things to talk about. I'll never stop watching your podcasts or your TV shows or reading what you have to write. You're not losing me. And, I feel like, I hate to take somebody else's line, but I feel like the luckiest person in the world. I got to serve the people of Santa Barbara County, and I'll never stop appreciating that. And people like you in the media who show our community for what it is. So when you say, my friend, those nice things about me, I want to come back at you and just say, coming from you, that means so much.
Oh,
so thank you.
Well, thank you, Joyce Dudley, and thanks for watching. We will see you next time on Newsmakers.